You're listening to Three Things to Know with Stephanie Haney, with experts and insiders on what you need to know in Northeast Ohio.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Three Things to Know podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being here for what I think will be a very fun conversation today. We will be talking about a conversation that is far from over. The royals. Specifically, I'm talking about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and a lot has happened since that interview that they had with Oprah, but a lot of questions remain unanswered. So I've got great guests today. I have talking with us today Rachel Bowie, who is the co-host of the Royally Obsessed podcast produced by PureWow.com, and also our resident Royals enthusiast, Romney Smith. You know her as our weekend morning anchor, but she is a major Royals enthusiast. So we'll be talking about all of that. And there is a lot to talk about here. Now, if you think that the conversation is over surrounding Harry and Meghan after that 2-hour interview with Oprah, you are very wrong. Here's proof. Who listening right now remembers True Hollywood Stories? Well, they have been rebooted. We are in season 2, by the way, of True Hollywood Stories, the current edition, and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have one coming out March 29th. You know when someone has an True Hollywood Story that some things have gone down, right? And things will definitely continue to go down because now we're embarking on a whole new chapter in the lives of Harry and Meghan here in the U.S. Well, first, before we get into the unanswered questions after the Oprah interview and where we stand today, let's talk about what we've learned since then. So again, their interview with Oprah was on March 7th. It was a 2-hour interview. Lots of bombshells dropped. They were more candid than I think anyone expected them to be. Meghan revealing her thoughts about suicide. Harry talking about how he was dealing with that and how he felt trapped and how he feels his family is trapped. The revelations about racism within the firm, which is something that I just can't quite wrap my mind around. We'll get into that in a little bit with our guests. 2-hour interview. Of course, that's all we saw on TV. Obviously, it was longer. It had to be trimmed down. We got a 4-sentence response from the palace. In case you haven't read it, let me just read it to you right now because it's only 4 sentences, so why not? Here's what the palace said after that interview. The whole family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan. The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. Harry, Meghan, and Archie will always be much loved family members. A lot of people taking issue with that while some recollections may vary part. That's kind of a gaslighting technique, to be honest. Well, I just don't remember it the same way that you remember it. Are you sure it happened that way? Getting people to question their reality. So a lot made of that. But since then, the palace has reportedly launched a diversity review, and the Queen is supposedly going to appoint a diversity czar to modernize the monarchy. This was reported by the Mail on Sunday, and a royal source told the Mail on Sunday that the palace feels like they have the policies, procedures, and programs in place, but haven't seen the progress they would like and accept that more needs to be done. So all 3 of the royal households will be under review. That includes Buckingham Palace. That's the headquarters of the monarchy that represents Queen Elizabeth II. Also Clarence House. That's where Prince Charles and his wife Camilla live. And then also Kensington Palace, which is the official London residence of Prince William and Kate Middleton. So there's that. Since then, we also know that Harry has now spoken to both his brother, Prince William, and his father, Prince Charles, and it wasn't a productive start to their conversations. And there's a lot of frustration that seems to be bubbling up because the palace keeps saying, let's handle things privately, but there's no effort to rectify false stories in the UK tabloids. Now, that's from Harry and Meghan's perspective. And remember, all that Harry and Meghan wanted was for the royals to intervene with false stories in the media that had a racial slant. And that's not my opinion that they had a racial slant. That's the opinion of dozens of members of the British Parliament who came forward and said, this is a problem. This needs to stop. We also know that no one has talked to Meghan since the Oprah interview that we are aware of, according to sources. Now, there is still all that conversation about a bullying inquiry into Meghan Markle's behavior from several years ago. We've also learned now that Harry and Meghan won't be a part of that initial inquiry, even though they wanted and asked to take part of it. But a good friend of Meghan Markle's went on ITV, a network in the UK, Janina Gavankar. Now, she's an actor. She's very close with Meghan Markle and also Harry. And Janina says that she is glad that the palace is investigating the bullying because it will shed light on how the Sussexes, Harry and Meghan, have been wronged. Now, who is Janina Gavankar? Well, she's an actor. She's been on Grey's Anatomy and other things, and she's close enough with Harry and Meghan that she actually watched the Oprah interview with them. So that sort of brings us up to speed with where we are right now, but still a lot of unanswered questions. And that's why I've got Rachel Bowie, again, from the Royally Obsessed podcast, which is produced by purewow.com, joining me today. By the way, that was previously named the #1 Royals podcast by Town & Country magazine. So we are getting the best of the best here. And of course, our Romney Smith, who is very on top of everything happening with the Royals. If you weren't following her on Twitter during the Oprah interview, she was live tweeting the whole thing. Go back and check out those tweets. Her perspective is on point. So we're going to have that conversation now about all of these unanswered questions. I'm going to bring them in right now. Rachel, Romney, thank you for joining me on the 3 Things to Know podcast today.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Now, there are no two better people in my life, and Rachel new in my life, to talk to you about all of these unanswered questions after that 2-hour Oprah interview with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I want to start with the difference that we're seeing in the way they're being treated between the U.S. media and the British media. And it's continuously not being very kind to them overseas.
No, it's not at all. And I think that it's amazing because everything that Harry and Meghan discussed and gave us sort of a peek behind the curtain of, but we saw overtly in a lot of the headlines, is continuing to play out post-interview. There's, I just feel like the undertones, the coverage, it's completely different than what we're seeing in the US, which is very positive here.
Do you think that has anything to do, is that strictly because Meghan is just an American? Do you think that might be part of it?
Well, so I do think that it's interesting because in the UK, there's the infamous stiff upper lip. There's the infamous stiff upper lip, which Meghan has talked about. And I think over here, we're much more comfortable discussing matters of, mental health, racism. I mean, we definitely are not perfect in any regard to that. We have a lot to learn, but I think that we are a lot more comfortable bringing those matters to the surface.
All right. Here's something that it's a little bit lost on me, and maybe you two can help me with this. The firm. Explain the firm to me, because the royal family are, apparently separate from the people that are running this institution. And Meghan even made it a point to say that is different from the Queen. Like, how is that a thing? Don't these people work for the Queen?
There's a crossover, though. There is a crossover. I think the royals are involved, but they don't exclusively make up the firm. So they have advisors. They have people who they consult. But there is some involvement in crossover. So there are likely members of the royal family who are very intricately involved with the firm, but the firm is not only royals.
Yeah, it's actually, I believe, hundreds of employees that work for Clarence House, which is Prince Charles' office. You have Kensington Palace, Kate and William's office, and then Buckingham Palace, which supports the Queen and her efforts and her role. Okay,
so when we listen to what Harry said about the family being kind of trapped, maybe that plays into some of that, because, it was that conversation when they came back from Canada, when they were just getting ready to announce that they were stepping back from the royals. The Queen invited them over, and then all of a sudden they land in the UK and it's, you can't come. And then Harry kind of implied like, oh, there were some sort of forces behind the scenes making that not really happen for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oprah.com kind of explained it really well, where she, there was a piece about the firm of 8, which is the kind of immediate family, and then the bigger firm. And I think the bigger firm is really responsible for the public image of the monarchy. I think Meghan was the one that called it, but we've heard it before, the men in gray suits. They're inside and outside the family, really controlling their reputation. And so I think that just, with that conversation with the Queen, what ended up happening where Harry was blocked from seeing her, I think that you really do have people that are controlling her calendar and they're trusted advisors. And Harry questioned, is that trust warranted? Do they deserve that trust? I don't know, but it's just they're maybe getting bad advice, and that's what needs a huge overhaul.
And I think a lot of Americans don't get it because we tend to think of royalty as the queen gets what the queen wants. And their structure is very different from, I think, our perception of what it means to be a queen. A queen as a figurehead, a queen as a monarch versus a queen as an actual political figure who has a direct hand and influence. I'm sure if the queen said, I want to eat at this restaurant, sure, she can clear it out and eat there. But when it comes to political matters that are also intricately involved with family, I don't think a lot of Americans understand that she is heavily influenced by these advisors. And if they say, this is not a good time to meet with your grandson, she will listen to their advice and say, okay. And I think for us, we're all thinking, well, how could grandma cut me off? I mean, it's my grandma. She says she wants to meet with me. Grandma's going to meet with me. And it's not like that over there.
Yeah, there's like a lot of handlers. We almost saw a lot of that fictionalized in The Crown. You know, there's just a lot of middle people that you go through to get to what is Harry's grandmother.
Mm-hmm. You know, and that's something that Meghan mentioned too in the Oprah interview is, Rami, to the point that you just made, she had a very different idea of what it was going to be like to be involved in the royal family than what it was actually like. And kind of those feelings of, yeah, this is grandma. Like, what do you mean I have to curtsy? Which was a very cute moment, by the way, her learning how to curtsy.
I mean, what a crash course to get a couple of minutes before you meet the queen. I did have a hard time believing that she didn't Google or didn't research anything about them, because regular people Google the queen. The regular people want to know, well, how deep should you curtsy? Is it like a little bit of a knee, or do you have to go all the way down and like fully bow your head? I don't know. I've never curtsied to anyone. I've never needed to, but I would Google that. I Googled my husband before we went on dates. So I'm kind of like, you didn't Google this family? I mean, in today's day and age, I don't know how she didn't do that, but it shows you the arc. And maybe I know she said she was naive, and maybe I wonder if she was a little too naive, if that's true, because if you're going into this family that is so visible, that has a 1,200 plus year history, you want to arm yourself with a little knowledge. That way you don't embarrass yourself and really try to make the best first impression possible. But again, being an American, we are really good about being ignorant and proud of it sometimes. And so I think she might have gotten caught up in like, Disney fairy tale. Oh my God, it's a prince and a princess. I just have to smile and be quiet and it'll be all good. And that was not exactly the right path to take, if in fact that's what she did, which it sounds like she was a little underprepared.
Well, and I'm also surprised that Prince Harry didn't, if that really was it, you would think he would have prepared her more, because I do feel like personally watching, you know, it's like the idea that maybe this is what goes on publicly where you curtsy to the queen, but behind the closed doors, it's just your grandmother and that doesn't exist. Like I was impressed during the interview that, you know, there wasn't more preparation for Meghan in that regard.
Also, Kate had some prep, because I've been following them for a long time, and you could see visually the progression of how her style of dress changed, how her hair, how her mannerisms changed. And so some of it, yes, you just intrinsically pick up. But I do think I remember an interview, and I want to say People magazine, where she talked about getting help on how to be a future royal. So someone coached Kate, but Meghan didn't get that coaching, which is not fair.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how much of that had to do, though, with the fact that Harry seems to have been a very purposeful sort of denier, like keeping his distance at times. You know, we've seen him just be, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a more casual royal leading up to this, because he wasn't, you know, first in line for succession to the throne after Prince Charles, of course, either. So he did, you know, and he did speak to that in the Oprah interview, how he felt bad for them, that they are trapped and they couldn't just leave.
Yeah, I mean, it's the line of succession. I mean, that's the whole heir and the spare dynamic. You know, Harry does have that, being just a little bit further down. He has that option in a way that William and Charles do not. They've been trained and prepared so differently their whole lives. Whether that was the right thing, I mean, I think Harry and William could have been such an incredible team had they not been so, it seems, threatened by him and Meghan in their success, right? You know, as we saw in the interview, particularly in Australia.
I totally agree. They could be such a powerhouse. And I think
that amazing.
When they say trapped, people also have to remember, while we might look at it as they're trapped, this is the only life they've known. They were literally born into royalty. They were born into a world with servants. They were born into this. They don't know anything different. Personally, they look out. They know not everyone has servants and maids. They know that, but they've never experienced that life, nor will they ever have to. So yes, on one hand, we can look at them as saying, you're trapped. You're the heir to the throne. You're the next king. You can't just denounce it and peace out. Harry could, though. And so that little bit of wiggle room, that little bit of freedom, and the fact that he's exercising it, I think was such a blow to royal loyalists that he's now being painted as a bad guy. And not only he, but really his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As the impetus for sort of at least what people are perceiving as, and that's not necessarily what came across, I think, in the interview. But I do want to talk about one other unanswered question, or another unanswered question. We're talking about who knew what and when they knew. Meghan revealing that there were moments where she did not want to be alive. And what we saw in the Oprah interview was a little bit different, maybe not different, but less than what we saw when her friend, Janina Gavankar, went on ITV and talked about who knew and what they knew. Because Meghan was very careful, again, to differentiate between the queen per se and the firm or the people she talked to, but talking about going and begging for help and being told she couldn't be helped when she had these suicidal thoughts because she wasn't a paid employee of the institution. But then Janina Gavankar going on ITV and saying, the family did knew. I don't know who knew, but the family knew. And even those implications from Harry. What do we think? Who do we think knew about that?
I mean, I think my take is that everyone generally knew. I mean, there definitely, when Meghan talked about the firm and going and talking to the HR department there, I think that that's where she was told she wasn't a paid employee. And that's where the distinction between the firm and the family comes in. It's hard to me, I take it that people knew and they just either didn't know how to help, didn't want to help, didn't want that public acknowledgement, or sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but, didn't want that to play out publicly that she was experiencing this, and they just tamped it down. I don't really know. It sounds like Harry was also a little uncertain how to help, but what's staggering in watching is just this is exactly history repeating itself. How could this happen again? They should be so familiar with this with their mental health patronages. That's a huge priority of theirs, in addition to just what they experienced with Diana. And that's what's devastating to me.
They all knew. Every single one of them, because think about it, in your regular life, if there's someone who you interact with, someone you care about, someone you love, if they're having just a bad day. So if we know if they're having a bad day, you're going to see a downward progression of that person, maybe withdrawing from events, maybe, when they're putting on a face for the public. And if they start getting to that point, and I'm sure there's part of it, right? There is a performance aspect of being a royal when you're going to events, serving in your official capacity. I get that. But these people. Harry knows when his brother's having a bad day versus if something's really wrong, because you can just sense that undercurrent because this is someone you love. I think a lot of people knew, but again, like Rachel said, what breaks my heart is they've dealt with this before. They had Diana, who had mental health issues, and the fact that they wouldn't help just because Meghan is not a paid employee. I don't care if you're a volunteer intern to clean the toilets. If you're having suicidal thoughts, I think for a lot of us, and as mental health becomes more normal to talk about, you think, y'all have all the resources in the UK at your fingertips. Why wouldn't you want to help her? Even if it's privately, bring in a mental health expert or a counselor, pay them cash if you need to, make them sign a really strict NDA, have them move into the castle, you help her. That way it helps your whole image, because we know that they want to protect their image. I do think perhaps they might see it as a sign of weakness, and that they didn't want anyone perceived as weak to be a future royal. I think in America here, we look at it as strength. If you can overcome something, if you can be vulnerable enough to share, yes, I experienced this and I'm reaching out for help. It broke my heart when I heard that she reached out for help, which that's a huge step to reach out for help. The fact that she reached out and they said no broke my heart, because no one deserves to be told no when they finally build up that courage to ask for help.
And you're right. The channel of communication, I think, between William and Harry would have that alone, I believe, was clear. He had to have known what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was very interesting, the point that they made about not wanting her, or that Meghan made about not being able to hop in an Uber and go to a doctor's office. But, like you said, Romney, bring that person in. No one needs to know who that person is seeing. Of course, I know they live in their separate houses or whatever, but I think there are certainly ways where they could have, if they wanted to. Fortunately, that it's unfortunate, I think, that they felt that way. Keep it under wraps.
They got enough rooms in that big old place. They could have done it. They have enough rooms. I don't know how many, but they have
775 in Buckingham Palace.
Plenty of time. Pay the experts, bring them in, tell them hush, hush, and then we'll send you one of our colonies. You can live on an island the rest of your life. Just help our girl out, because we need to present a united, strong image. I wonder who their PR people. They need to hire me. Honestly,
I know,
because I could help spin this totally differently. I need to apply for that new, what is that new position? Diversity officer. I need to apply for that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The diversity czar that they're bringing in. I do also, though, want to say, I do think it was very brave of Harry, probably very difficult for him to say that he was not comfortable approaching his family about what Meghan was struggling with because he felt shame. I think that was very important for him to vocalize because I think a lot of people can probably resonate with that. And it's great that that's being talked about so that we can sort of just get that stigma out of there, because there's no reason for that. There's absolutely no reason for that. We know better. We need to do better.
I also think Harry deserves so much credit in that when he didn't get help, he got his family out. Like, I think that you don't want to say that he is completely responsible for saving Meghan's life. She did a lot of that herself. But I think just the fact that he was so willing to walk away to save her, I think in where she was mentally, what she was going through, if he wasn't going to get help in the firm, he was willing to leave it all behind in the family.
That is love and commitment, because at the end of the day, that's his wife. And he said, if I have to leave my home country, if I have to leave this royal family in order to save your life, I truly believe in my spirit. Part of that was Diana and him saying, I already lost my mother and I couldn't control that. I do have the power to do something to help save my wife. And I will do everything in my capacity, even if that means leaving the royal family, leaving my home country. I need to save my wife and child, and now unborn child.
Oh, this concept of the firm, by the way, every time we say the firm, I'm just thinking of the Tom Cruise movie. I think it's Tom Cruise. And these just like board of directors of this firm just like pulling the strings. I don't love it. I don't love the concept of the firm. I'm just going to say it.
Supposedly Prince Philip was the one that coined that. When he married into the family, he referred to it as the firm. That's the rumor. So I think that's so interesting.
Interesting. From what I've seen of The Crown, I don't think that was a loving term that he was using.
No.
Nope.
Okay, I want to talk about a very serious topic here. Another major unanswered question. That comment about the color of skin of baby Archie. They let us know. It was important for us to let us know that comment was made, but they were not telling us who made that comment. And then afterwards, we learn from Gayle King that she had been told it wasn't the Queen or it wasn't Prince Philip, but not getting any more information on who we think said that. What do you ladies think?
Okay, I'm gonna start because I started watching a lot of British media. Even the British media were afraid to articulate which royal they think it was. In America, we were all like, it's Charles. No, it's it. And we would name it, right? Over there, they are literally so afraid they can't even name which royal they think it might be, which is wild to me. So that tells you how much control the firm has over any media outlet and their relationship and who gets access and who doesn't get access. Here's one thing I want to note, though. Coming from a family that has white people, Black people, we've actually got Asians and Hispanics in my family. We're a very multicultural family. It is not out of the realm to say people wonder because of colorism. Let me explain. My mother, my birth mother, is the color of Meghan Markle. I'm clearly not. I'm darker, and my dad's even darker than me. So it is a question that some people have of, oh, is she going to be light? Is she going to be medium? Is she going to be dark? I'm not saying that's not rude. It is, because who cares? It's a beautiful child entering your family who deserves all the love and support they should get. It's not exactly uncommon, especially when you have mixed families, right? Some people wonder, and then you have to tell them on the side, that was really rude, and we don't care what color the child is because it does not matter. That's the basic point. In my opinion, I think it was one of three people: his dad, his brother, or his sister-in-law. And if it was his sister-in-law, Kate Middleton, I could see him being like, bro, check your sister. What's going on? Why are you not saying anything? Why would she ask such an ignorant question? But maybe she genuinely didn't know and thought she was just being inquisitive. Again, we don't know how exactly it was said and what exactly it was said, but he was very bothered when Oprah tried to clarify with him because he was like, I'm not repeating that conversation. It irritated his soul. But I will say, in general, people do get questioned about that, about little mixed babies. That is a common question. It's still rude. And I can see it is disrespectful because at the end of the day, who cares if they're light, if they're mocha, if they're caramel latte, if they're chocolate, because it's the baby that you love. This is your blood.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it was fascinating to watch, Harry and Meghan weren't saying names. And then the next morning we heard from, Oprah on CBS This Morning that it wasn't the Queen, it wasn't Prince Philip. And so it really just, for me, it was like, I guess the only other person that I would add is maybe Camilla, but I agree with you that it has to be in that immediate circle.
But do you think he would have gotten that mad if it was Camilla?
No.
He don't like her anyway.
And that's where I'm just like, I feel like I'm not tuning into body language experts, but every time Charles came up, Harry just tensed in a way that he didn't when he spoke about other people. And I feel like even Meghan went out of her way when she did talk about what happened with the flower girl dresses with Kate. I don't feel like there was a anger there in the same way. She went out of her way to say that Kate had apologized. They were, she's a good person. So I think, again, this is total guessing game. And that's what they left us with after this interview, to guess. But I think that, to me, it's hard for me to not think Charles,
but they did upset Queen Oprah, because when she says what twice.
Oh yes.
That's real. That's
Can
real.
we also pause to say what a masterclass that interview was? Like, I just miss Oprah so deeply. I think we keep seeing, she's going to be doing more interviews, but she just kept going back. And I was so grateful to her.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I think I was shocked at what they were willing to reveal. And just to throw my 2 cents in here, I think it was Prince Charles. And I also think that Prince William was there. And that's why I think we caught him in that candid moment when he said, my family is very much not racist, because I think that he felt like maybe in that moment, of course, obviously, yes, this is pure speculation. I think he felt like he was maybe coming to the defense of his father, because to your point, Rachel, there was a definite different way of speaking that Harry had when he was talking about his father. It was almost like a kind of vibe like that. And whereas when he talked about Harry, it was just, it's space. It just is what it is right now. And it did seem like there was more of a tension there talking about Prince Charles. So that's my guess, which brings me to the next unanswered question that we have is, why did Prince Charles stop taking Harry's calls?
Because he's a wimp. Oh my gosh, who does that to their son? I mean, I know people have problems and family communication issues, but it takes a lot to cut off your own son. And I think part of it was protecting his image, protecting the crown, right? You gotta, again, we don't get this because we don't have royals here, but his duty is to the crown first. A lot of us don't understand putting something else above family, maybe God. Okay, we say, okay, God, family, our job, right? And over there, it's truly the crown, God, the crown, the Anglican Church, that's all mixed together. So God is first, because it is Anglican Church, then family. So part of it is just him protecting the royal family, because he knows he's the next king once mama kicks the bucket. So part of it was just protection, and part of it is just, he's a jerk. You could at least call your son. I mean, come on. There's secret communications. We all know that. Yeah,
that part, again, it's hard for Charles to come out favorably after that at all, because you're just like, my guess my assessment is also that we know from a timeline that December was when Harry and Meghan emailed Charles supposedly the details of their plan to exit, and then I believe that nearly that exact email was leaked in the Sun in the early January. So I think I'm just so curious if that email showed up and then Charles stopped taking. I just am the timing of it all, but it's incredibly sad.
Yeah.
Well, that's something I just don't know that we'll ever know. I think that's probably two people who are not going to talk on that topic. Mm-hmm. Do we think that Princess Diana saw this coming? Much has been made of the fact that she did leave Prince Harry money, and thankfully that she did, because as we learned, he was cut off, and that's what they had to sort of survive on until they got these other things that they have going. Do you think that she saw this coming?
I don't know if she could have seen it coming. Harry was so young, and William too, but I feel like she definitely knew that the monarchy was pretty messed up, and she had wanted out and was looking, we've heard stories that before her death, she was thinking of moving to America as well. I do think that it's worth acknowledging that she did want to, the money she set aside was for both of her boys, and she cared so deeply about both of their well-being. So, and they were equally impacted by her death.
I do think she knew, and here's why. Because these boys have access, men, as grown men now, these princes have access to so much money and so many resources. The money that she set aside wasn't about, in case the monarchy, collapses, I want to give you a little something to buy a house. That really wasn't it. It was, I've been through hell, and if you guys go through anything, I don't wish it upon you, but if anything were to happen similar or worse than me, I want there to be a safety net. And that is just a mother's love to me. So I do think that it was hope for the best, but prepare for the worst kind of situation. And that's why she set aside this money. Again, William doesn't really need the money. We know he's the heir to the throne, right? He's got a ton of resources and money available to him. Harry's the one that needs the money. And now we know he's living off the money. And I think, again, when people think, oh, the mom, you know, some people's parents leave them 10,000, 100,000, a house, whatever. Again, this is different. They need security. He is literally, even though they kicked him out of the family, he's still, if anything happens to him, I've always said this, if anything happens to him, Meghan, Archie, or the unborn baby girl on American soil, oh, it's on. It is on. Because again, they are still highly respected. So yeah, I think she was setting this up in hopes that they would never have to use it, but she wanted it to be there as a gift just in case they did because of what she went through.
Yeah, a safety net for sure.
Now, when Harry was talking about history repeating itself, he sort of brought up what he felt was like a turning point for them. Meghan mentioned something else that she felt was the turning point for them. So I want to talk about those two sort of unanswered questions here. There was that moment, of course, we learned in the interview that Meghan says that Kate Middleton made her cry over something that had to do with the flower girl dress related to their wedding. And she felt when that was not corrected by the family in the media, that was the beginning of sort of her character assassination. That was a turning point. Now, Harry says the turning point that he felt was when they made that trip to Australia and saw how dazzling Meghan was. Do we think, I know we don't really know what happened, first of all, with the dress and the wedding. We don't really know what happened there, but all of this kind of ties together, maybe a central theme. Do we think that the royal family is jealous of Meghan and the attention that she gets?
That's a good question.
By asking it, I'm suggesting it, obviously. I think there seems to be a lot of that because she is very comfortable being outspoken.
I think she's a lot of things that they didn't necessarily want, right? So one, she's American. They wanted their own. They wanted a British person. They didn't want an American as the potential princess. So one, she's American. Two, she's divorced. Now, if you know your royal history, you know that is a no-no. You are not supposed to marry someone who's divorced. Doesn't matter why they got divorced. Doesn't matter how young they were. The fact that you were divorced is a no-no. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the Queen's sister, Margaret, right? She couldn't be with her, the love of her life, because he'd been divorced. They do not like that. You're not going to get the Queen's blessing if you're divorced. Okay, so that's two things. She's American, right? And she's divorced. Captain Obvious, she's also Black, right? Even though she's light-skinned and very pretty, she's still multiracial. That's another thing they didn't want. So she's got a couple of things working against her, and people are saying, why couldn't you find a nice British girl who's never been divorced? Why couldn't you find someone that looks like you who will fit in culturally? So I think there were a few things working against her from the start. So when she started to shine, I don't know if it was jealousy or if it was, we have plenty of people over here who could have been very suitable for him. He just didn't fall in love with any of them. So it's a little bit of jealousy, maybe a little bit of just straight hate on her. But I think she had a nice little combo of things that they did not welcome initially.
Yeah, you look back at those photos and videos from the Australia tour and it's magical. And I think you had the difference, you know, there were a lot of comparisons to when Diana and Charles went to Australia, I believe in 1983. And everyone was like, oh no, I'm not on the side of the street that Diana's walking. And they didn't want Charles. And then, but this trip they had Meghan and Harry, I mean, equal love for both. I think people were really excited. And it maybe speaks to the inability of the monarchy to modernize again, because they could have harnessed that power. I mean, you look at the diversity within the Commonwealth. Meghan was representative of something that would have been so wonderful for them to have. Even if they made a statement against the racist coverage that was playing out in the press, that would have just been so rewarding for so many people that feel that day to day. And I think that, again, they just didn't.
They totally missed the mark with that, because honestly, think about it. They colonized the world. I think out of 200 countries in the United Nations, they either colonized or had a military presence in 171 of them. So you can't say they don't have a history of racism, right? We know the history of the monarchy. So one thing I was shocked that they didn't say with all of this hullabaloo is it's just like, hey, we're not racist. We have learned from our past and we are growing, and we have a diverse people that we love and respect in Britain. The fact that they didn't say that, again, hire me as your PR person. That was so easy.
That needs to be their move.
It was so easy. Instead, they were like, there's no place for racism. Just say you're not racist. Like, I don't know. That
But
bothered
isn't
me.
that the frustration too? Like, I feel like so many people, so many social media accounts I follow, it's like, I think all of us sit there being like, why wasn't this handled differently? Is that our American training? Like, we're so used to having people that talk openly and are much more better equipped to acknowledge this. It's the whole never complain, never explain thing. I don't know, but it's just that statement was bad.
Yeah.
And not enough.
Yeah, the whole 4 sentences after a 2-hour interview.
And that's why we don't accept it as true. We're like, nope, sorry, Queen, try again. Your PR team should have been watching at whatever time it was there and crafting more detailed responses. But maybe that's why they're getting diversity committee, because I would imagine that their PR response team is monochromatic.
Well, and a lot of people are getting let go too. Like leading up to Oprah, I feel like a lot of the people that were calling the shots have moved on. Not let go, but moved on.
They need to modernize. Look at Harry. He's the fun royal. Come on, William versus Harry. We've always known Harry's the fun one. He shows more personality. That's why I think he connects with people. Now that he's got a wife that does too, they were completely outshining William and Kate, which is fine. They serve different purposes, but they could have just done this in the right way. There's just so many things they could have done right to really reinforce we are a diverse, welcoming, royal, modernizing family. And they just failed.
Well, and one last thing too, I really liked what Meghan said, that just because you like Meghan, you don't have to hate Kate. Just because you like Kate, you don't have to hate Meghan. Like that is something that could have been amplified within the monarchy, lift them all up together. And what a Fab Four, as they were originally called.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And to go back to this whole concept of the firm, which I absolutely hate, you know, that her making the distinction between the family and the firm, all they wanted was for them to come out and say, leave our girl alone. Leave our girl alone.
Yep. That's what's wild. That's all.
That's it.
It's so easy. But the show goes on for the royal family. They have been very busy. You know, we saw Kate Middleton out. She was leaving flowers at the site of, unfortunately, Sarah Everard, who was recently murdered. We all heard about that. Absolutely terrible. So many people sharing those stories. We saw that happening. The Queen was making jokes about meeting the first man in space and, you know, how, well, he was a Russian. There's not really much else to say about that. And, you know, Prince Philip, home. Yep. After a month in the hospital, a lot going on for them, a lot going on for Harry and Meghan too. They've got a lot of things going on. They've got their podcast coming up with Spotify. It's out now. That's doing very well. They've got that big deal with Netflix, which, you know, they've gotten some criticism for. But again, you got to pay for all that security. Tyler Perry's not going to support you in his home with security forever.
Exactly. And they've got a baby girl on the way. Mm-hmm. Let's not forget that.
And Harry just took a job as a tech executive at BetterUp.com. That just broke. So yeah, he's on staff with adding that to his resume. So,
but sidebar, I will say I would kind of love it if Tyler Perry becomes the godfather of this movie. Wouldn't that be so cool?
That would be so.
Medea babysits a royal. I'm here for that movie. There you go.
His influence and help that was also just the love for Tyler Perry during
that was a big shocker to me. I thought, what? Tyler Perry? Where'd that come from? But
the America and the world, we were like, thanks, Tyler. We were so happy.
I know Tyler Perry swoops in, fairy godfather to the royal family.
I love
it. All right, here's our last remaining unanswered question: is when will Prince Harry and Meghan see the royal family again? When do we think that'll happen?
Well, I'm personally frustrated by, you know, it goes back to all these things like, who do you believe? There's a lot of this person can exclusively confirm that Harry will be at the unveiling of the Princess Diana statue in July. Like, we know from Gayle King that they are still currently having unproductive conversations. At the end of that unproductive conversation, is it like, by the way, just everyone get out their calendars? Like, I don't know how this works, but I think that it is, to me, I feel like we don't definitely know. I do believe that Harry would want to be there for the unveiling of that statue and for his grandfather's 100th birthday, things like that. But
because we don't know when the baby's due,
that's also a part of it.
He might want to be. I mean, her belly's kind of big, but if that baby's due around the same time, baby comes first.
That's
right?
a priority.
If he was still a royal might come first, but baby comes first now. So I tend to think if I'm Meghan, I'm going to wait until after the birth of my child. Mm-hmm. Until we go over the pond. If I'm Harry, I might want to go, but to me, it really all depends on when that baby's due. If the baby comes next month, we're good. But she said summer, I believe. So
right. Yeah, she said, I think early summer.
If the kid's born, potentially we could see that happen. I think if the kid is not born, not a chance, and it's going to have to wait.
Yeah, so much will be dependent on that for sure. Mm-hmm. But that's where I'm just like, people are like, I can exclusively confirm Harry will be there. I'm like, who are you to confirm that?
And can you exclusively confirm her due date? Because that's kind of a big factor.
Yeah, it just makes me laugh. So,
Well, there are still so many unanswered questions, lots to see. Well, of course, we'll be following what Harry and Meghan do here in the U.S. This has been a great conversation. Ladies, thank you for joining me. So we had this opportunity to get obsessed about the royals for a little bit here on the Three Things to Know podcast, and we are going to have to do this again.
Absolutely.
For sure. Thanks
for having me.
Thanks, ladies. There was so much more that we could have talked about when it comes to Harry and Meghan and the royals and the unanswered questions and all the things that they have coming up next and all of that good stuff. So I'm very happy to report that Rachel has said she will definitely come back and have further conversations with us. Romney, of course, will be here. We certainly couldn't do it without her. And in the future, Rachel's podcast co-host, Roberta Fiorito, will join us as well. She wasn't available this week, but she'll be here in the future. Major thanks to them. I can't wait to continue this conversation because it's so fascinating how Harry and Meghan are really sort of reinventing their lives and making it work for them. Okay, now it's time for what you need to know in NEO. And since we've been talking about the royals, that has me thinking about the UK and my time studying abroad in the UK a million years ago, and tea. And I'm a tea lover in general, but drank a lot of tea when I was over there, always thinking about the fancy tea when I'm thinking about the UK and the London experience. And there's a place where you can have a wonderful experience like that right here in Northeast Ohio. It's called the Dragonfly Tea Room, and it's in Canal Fulton. Now, if you go there, you'll see this beautiful, quaintly decorated tea room where you can have high tea and a relaxing lunch with friends and a bunch of other options there as well. You get served tea in the most beautiful china. They've got a cafe-style menu. It's just quite lovely. And the reason I'm letting you know about this, the way that I found out about this is my niece used to go there with her mother when she was younger every year for her birthday. They had this tradition where they would have high tea, and it is so adorable and so precious. So they do things like that. They also host private parties and themed events. Some of their themed events that are very popular are the Easter Bunny tea, the Harry Potter tea. They do a Friendsgiving tea. They also do Gilmore Girls parties. Those are really popular, all kinds of things like that. You can see all of that information on the website, which is dragonflyontheriver.com. And it's also a bed and breakfast and a winery. So really something for everybody there. But the thing that particularly draws me to this is the tea. And they've got some of the finest teas, a really wide range. So you can see a lot of cool stuff there. If you want to check it out, it's at 215 Market Street West in Canal Fulton. And again, the website is dragonflyontheriver.com. And now it is time for this week's A Good Follow. And this one is obvious. I have to tell you a little bit more about the Royally Obsessed podcast, which is produced by purewow.com. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, this week, one of my guests was Rachel Bowie, who is a co-host. She was here today. Her co-host is Roberta Fiorito. And like I said, she couldn't be here this week, but she will be here in the future. They put out a podcast every single week. Now, today, we really focused on Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, but they cover it all, and there is so much going on with the royals just beyond Harry and Meghan. I know that's kind of what we focus on because Meghan is an American. They're living here in the U.S. in Southern California now, but there's a lot going on. And also, their podcast has very cute segments. They do this thing called the Royal Toast, for one. They also talk about their highs and lows for the week, just to name a couple. And it's really well produced, and here's me just being a little bit of a tech nerd. They have great sound effects. And they also have this great announcer voice that's very regal and British sounding, a little bit of a British accent. You have to check it out. Again, it's the Royally Obsessed podcast. Find that wherever you get your podcast. You can also follow it on Instagram. The Instagram account for it is Royally Obsessed Podcast. And if you want to follow the hosts, which I highly recommend, you can follow Rachel on both Twitter and Instagram at RKBNYC. And you can follow Roberta on both Twitter and Instagram at Robbie Frito. That's IEROBBIE Frito, FRITO, like the Frito chip, which I love that handle. I'm going to have to talk to her about that when we eventually get her on here on the Three Things to Know podcast. All right, that's it for this week's Three Things to Know with Stephanie Haney podcast. Thank you for being here. I hope you had fun. I had a blast this week talking about the royals. Can't wait to do it again. If you're liking the show, I would love it if you could share it with your friends. Also, leave a review and a rating. If you leave a review, I'll read it on the podcast. Go ahead and send me an email too, shaney@wkyc.com, or shoot me a DM And I'd like to start doing that. I'd like to incorporate your comments and things that you have to say about the podcast, and we'll read them here on the show. So make sure you do that. I will see you back here next week. Between now and then, everybody, stay safe and be well. I'm Stephanie Haney.
Thanks for listening to 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney from WKYC Studios. Subscribe now to stay in the know.